Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are joined by Dr. Grant Venerable. Ecstatic to have him here with his wisdom, his accolades, and all he's accomplished. He's just a really kind, sweet soul. And honestly, I say this every week. I love speaking with you. Your insight, your knowledge, your wisdom, and that you continue to share. And by the way, he's published his memoirs, and has over, is it 1,400 pages? I forget. But we have a lot to talk about with Grant today, right before the holiday. And I know you said you had a busy week. What's going on?
Well, my elder siblings and I are getting moved into a new property, and there's just a lot going on. I think, particularly for me, my career is expanding, my emphasis expanding. So. And my thinking is reframing. That's where I want to go with what's happening now. A different way of looking. That's what my memoir really is dealing with. It is, how do different demographics of human beings live their lives? How do they develop them? How do they improve them? How do they deal with unpredictability in their lives? And I want to step out without a safety net, in terms of, I like to take a few notes and talk from the notes, but something has been brewing in my maturing wisdom, I'll put it like that, of the world and how things work. How did they evolve? How did we get to today from where we were 10,000 years ago? Then how did we get to 10,000 from a 250,000 years ago? Then how did we get from when the universe began? If we can call it a beginning, there's still discussion. Did it have a beginning? Or was there just another alternative universe to step into? I want to get right down to the point of what I am looking at, namely how things change track. And the track I'm on, I'm joining together one track, I'll call it religious. And then there's another track, I'll call it industrial. I'll call it secular industrial. I'll call it scientific, technological. So I'm bringing all of those tracks together, which is what some people in academic tracks don't see that that's even possible, but others do. Education is probably the oldest field of study that human beings have available, because it involved, just from hunter-gatherer people, in the first tasks that they had to learn how to transmit the whole knowledge of how do we survive, how do we get from today to tomorrow, how do we get from this morning to this afternoon, what are we going to eat? There aren't any restaurants. This is like 200,000 years before the present. There's no supermarkets. There's no trade. There's no nothing. People living in 200 people, and they tend to rove until they started to settle. So I want to jump in, move the development up to when humans became agriculturalists. That was the second profession after education. If we could say education included how you go out and hunt for an animal, or what kind of berries do you look for? How do you avoid poison mushrooms? How do you pass that knowledge to the next generation? That's where the field of what we can call mythology comes in. Now, I need to inform my listeners, mythology is not what we think it is, because people use words like, oh, that point of view is just a myth. It's a fairy tale. That's not the kind of mythology that's important. That's a real academic field of very serious study. Mythology is how a people survives from one generation to the next, including one day to the next. And it is a way of developing stories told to the young people, to the children, for how to deal with survival. One of those early stories had to do with things like the creator. What is that? People suspected there was something like a creator because they noticed, certain of their groups, whether they were young or old, they would be departed from their bodies. Their bodies would still be there, but not moving. There's no life in the body. And then we look at ourselves, who is what created us? Is there a creator? So stories about creators develop. And I'll just use the word religion, which is to frame what you think is a priority in life. And some people use the word God, some people use the word deity. There are many, many words that can be used. I want to talk specifically because I think this would be real interesting because it set a pattern that's not much appreciated, even in an educated culture. I want to talk about when the even before there was a Jewish people, but I want to start with the predecessors of the Jewish people of today. And that goes back a few thousand years to really what we call Hebraic shepherding people who tended their flocks at night or in the day. We hear a lot about that at Christmas time when shepherds were in the field tending their flocks and they looked up and they saw a star they'd never seen before up in the heavens. And that started stories that we tell. We retell that every year, particularly in one of the religious expressions, the Christian religion. But where did that come from? It came from the Jewish religion. Where did that came from? It came from nomads. It came from Abbas, desert fathers who would look at the sky. They would study the stars. They would study. They would put the results of their conversations when they got it papyrus and write up what became later called the scriptures. All right, I want to start with what are the temples, the Jewish temples, and in all of my gathering of knowledge today, I'm realizing my knowledge of science and mathematics came because, now this is a bold statement, but it's a true statement. It came from the existence of the temple culture. And I want to talk about the first temple, and I have some things to refer to there. I got to get to my notes here because the notes are really well
Of course, we
organized.
all
So
need
let
our
me
notes. You got it. You have so
find
much.
them
Go ahead. Take your
on
time.
my screen. Um, okay, here they come up. Uh, I want to talk about the Jerusalem temple. Can you still hear me? Can you hear me now, Jill?
Got it?
Okay. I'm trying to get a page
Hmm.
here. Maybe I can't get it, but I'll see. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Grant? Grant, I lost your
Okay.
audio. There you go.
Okay. You can hear me.
Yeah.
All right. Uh, the Jerusalem temple was a central place of worship for the Jewish people. Can you hear that statement?
Yep. I heard it loud and clear. Yep.
Oh, great, great. Can you see me?
I see you. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. We're in shape here. The Jerusalem temple was a central place of worship for the Jewish people, where they experienced significant events that shaped its history. The first temple built in 957 BCE, meaning before the Common Era. In the 10th century BCE by King Solomon,
Yeah,
was destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BCE. Are we still with it, Jill?
I got you. Yep. Absolutely.
Can you still,
Yep. I hear and see you. Can you not
can
see
still,
me?
okay. All
Yeah.
right. I might want to make sure this is the
Important. Yeah. No,
uh,
we got it.
King Solomon built the first temple,
Okay.
957, and then it was destroyed
Oh,
by
wow.
the Babylonians in 587 BCE. However, in 516 BCE, the second temple was uh, begun after the Neo-Babylonian Empire was conquered by Achaemenid, the Achaemenid Empire. It stood for this second empire, stood for a longer period than the first temple and was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. Then that was the end of centralized worship in Jerusalem and leading to the Jewish diaspora. The destruction had profound religious, cultural, and psychological effects on Judaism, necessitating a reconfiguration
Yep.
of Jewish religious practice and identity. For the Romans, the destruction of the temple symbolized their victory and dominance over Judea. The third temple, a hypothetical structure, has not been built since the fall of Jerusalem.
Wow.
The temple's destruction marked a pivotal moment in Jewish history, leading to the fall of Jerusalem and significant consequences for Jewish identity and national aspirations. Now, that's where it gets interesting
Okay.
because there was discussion after 70 AD. Let's see if I can get back up on my screen here. There I am. Um, there was discussion about, well, aren't we going to build a third temple?
Yeah.
Like around 100, 200. We used to call it AD, but it's called CE,
Yes.
Common Era. Uh, the majority opinion was no, we haven't seen the Messiah yet. We
Mm-mm.
should wait for the Messiah's arrival. That's part of the religious storytelling under the heading of mythology. It's how a people transmits to its children the meaning of being that people. That was the time that Christianity was emerging out of Judaism,
Yep.
and that's when things were really getting interesting. Um, what happened? The rabbinical councils that were becoming more important that would keep up with things like that. Should we build a new temple and when, if we do? Well, there's not been one built. That's where Grant Venerable myself is coming in
Aw.
with his observations about how things change track in their development. Because I have studied how the different fields of science and
Mm-hmm.
specialties in chemistry and physics change track as they move into new knowledges that were not recognized before. Now, there's a prominent lady back around in the 1950s, maybe the 40s when she started. She looked at the structure of atoms, called the shell structure of the atom, which was developed by Niels Bohr and Rutherford and others back in Europe, in the early 20th century. Well, Mrs. Mayer, who was over in Germany, and
Mm-hmm.
then she was at the University of Chicago long before I got to the University of Chicago, well, maybe 20 or 30 years before, she said, well, let's use our good sense in science where we think analogically when we see a key where we can do that successfully. So she looked at the structure of what they understood about the atom itself, that the atom was layered. Well, it was a sphere, and it had spheres, larger and larger spheres around that, which indicated where electrons resided in
Wow.
the atom. And there were those electrons nearest the nucleus, and then other what we call orbits or orbitals, where the electrons live as you get
Yeah.
further away from the nucleus. She asked a question, and that's what the Jewish tradition of the temple left in the form of the Talmud.
No.
And that was, how do you ask questions of systems you cannot even see? But you think they're there, like they were studying the creator. How does the creator create people? What does the creator expect? Maria Gerbert Mayer asked questions of the atomic nucleus. You
Yeah.
can't see the nucleus. It's like Holy Writ,
Uh-huh.
invisible, mysterious, but the nucleus is in the inside of the atom. And she ventured a hypothesis that said, well, perhaps the nucleus also has energy levels in spheres, rings around the nucleus. So, and different, what we call nucleons, instead of electrons, inhabit those nuclear orbitals. Now, everyone's heard of some of the nucleons. The
Yes.
most important one, the ones we found out about first, were protons and neutrons. And they live in the nucleus, supposedly in levels, orbitals, just like the electrons live outside the nucleus in orbitals. So Mrs. Mayer made a theory of nucleon orbits around the, the, the center of the nucleus and calculated the energy levels of those orbits. And then, along with two other scientists in Europe, were doing a similar thing. And they looked at experimental data and said, well, this, I think, is a fruitful thing to do. So they finished the analogy and said, okay, so the nucleus also has energy levels, just like the electrons do in an atom. For that, Maria Mayer received or shared a Nobel Prize in physics back, 1950s, 1960s, something like that. And it was a very important development. But it was what I'm calling a change of tracks in what scientists study. Well, in the whole academic world, we've changed tracks from one field to another. We've changed tracks from social sciences to economics. We've changed tracks as we understand more about the basic philosophy of each thing that we study in the world of colleges and universities and high schools, grammar schools. So that is the story of really knowledge development. The same thing applies to the story of the steam engine and what led up to the steam engine way, way, way back. Well, horses led up to the steam engine. What led up to horses? Donkeys. What led up to that? Uh, and then beyond the steam engine, then we developed, well, they used wood. They used coal to drive the steam, to drive the locomotive forward. But what did we do later? So these locomotives got up to a top speed of like 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour. And then we reached the era of the automobile and piston-driven locomotives, engines running on uh, fuel from petroleum, gasoline. And then we were able to apply that to airplanes and to making jet planes. Again, this is a changing of track, a changing of the track in any area of human knowledge. The interesting thing to me is that it all started with a religious track, what people call religion. They cannot see. So they call it a mystery. But scientists are doing the same thing. We don't call it worship, we call it research. Researching knowledge where we can't see the things we're researching. That was my field. I was one of the few chemists in a new field of chemistry called radiation chemistry, which is a branch of nuclear chemistry. Well, nuclear chemistry and physics were really being developed in the 1940s and beyond, but they were developed initially around the late 1800s when electrons were being discovered and protons were being hypothesized and neutrons. I was really thrilled and excited about when I studied what is the effect of high energy radiation on chemical substances. I can't see my chemical substances except when I pour them out of a bottle. But in order to do my research, I had to dissolve substances like cobalt cyanide into water. Very, very pure water, because you didn't want contaminants messing it up. But you wanted to see what you could produce if you subjected these cobalt compounds to very high energy radiation. And I'm going to leave out all of the complicated research stuff, but I'll just tell you that the entity I was able to generate based on the work of my research advisor named Edwin J. Hart, who was in 1960. He and a colleague in England discovered something called the hydrated electron. Well, hydrated electrons are really counterparts of grapes. If you look at a raisin, and a raisin is a dry grape, but if you rehydrate the raisin, it theoretically becomes a grape again. Well, Hart and his colleague Jack Boak over in London were discovered that there's a little species called a hydrated electron. It's just a pure electron, but when it is generated in water by high energy radiation like gamma rays, X-rays, or high energy light rays, it gets in that water. It is already in the water when it forms, but water molecules begin to form around that electron. So it's like an electron with water molecules in a cage of water. And that itself is a very short-lived compound. It only lives for about a few milliseconds or 20 milliseconds. Well, that's a thousandth of a second if the water is pure and only has water in the water. But if you add something else to the water, that hydrated electron will react to it instantly, very quickly, and turn it into something else. And that's what my research advisor, Jack Halpern, who was on the campus of the University of Chicago, wanted to determine what would happen with some of his compounds that he had been studying for years, called transition metal complexes. So that became my project. to look at his cobalt cyanide complexes to see what would happen to them if you reacted them with a hydrated electron. Well, number one, it only took about 5 millionths of a second for the electron to react with the cobalt cyanide. And in doing that, we discovered new compounds that lived only a short time, but they were important as intermediate in reactions that you could see or at least run on a bench top. And that's why it was important, because these little intermediate transition metal complexes would turn into something that could live a long time. Uh, Cobalt cyanides, cobalt something else's. All that to say, the change, how a field can change track in terms of what scientists are studying in that track. Well, economists do the same thing with what they're studying. They may not understand what they're looking at, except they're studying the markets. They're studying what's happening in a market, the prices of products. They're studying all about that. So the other fields have their own social sciences, sociology, psychology, and all of those fields that we study in universities. Um, that really talks about why education is so important. Education itself does not stay the same. Methods of doing education should be changing to better and better methods so that kids from pre-kindergarten on the way up through high school, all the way up through college, learn better and better. Okay, now that's where we meet reality today, because that's not happening everywhere we look in our schools. So what happens? Another track change occurs. People discover if they go into politics, they can argue, oh, education is having problems. I know how to solve them. So elect me and we'll have a better way of doing education. And we'll drive out all of the bad education that's taking place. The problem is all of that is based upon people's opinions, which are not necessarily proven. All they see is, well, yes, some kids aren't learning like they should, and
Yep.
others are learning brilliantly. So how do we get those not learning up to where the good ones are? Because the United States, despite all of the controversy over those who say education is no good and those who say, no, we got places we're doing education very successfully, and we have the students to show it.
Yeah.
And that's why so many people from other parts of the world come over here to go to college, come over here to go to graduate school, including our biggest client has been China. And some of the greatest science has been done by Chinese citizens who have migrated.
Yeah.
They've come as migrants to the United States and have won Nobel Prizes working in the universities of the United States, all the way from California to New England. But that all goes back to the evolution of the Jerusalem temple.
Mm.
And it's like that's where science and religion meet smack dab in the middle. It just takes a different way of putting on mental eyeglasses to see that there is that unifying point between science, mathematics, and religion that pulls them together in a unity. But you have to change your thought process in order to recognize that that's what's
Yeah.
going on. And so some of the greatest universities, all the universities, colleges were founded by religious institutions. If you go way back and one of the first were the Jewish yeshivas, and then you get uh, which you get in Europe with the Renaissance, you get with the people I talked last time about miscegenation. So this is intellectual miscegenation, where you're mixing the ideas from different fields of study. And the way that the rabbinical councils in Europe and over the last 2,000 years have really, they've driven the way you ask questions
Yeah.
to systems you can't talk to, like we're talking now. We can't talk that way to a
No.
molecule or an electron. So you set up, and there's no one way to follow the process of doing it. So that's why sometimes we get into trouble when the news media, the ladies and gentlemen there, don't themselves understand the scientific method as well as they need to. So
Nope.
then they enter the area as amateurs, saying, "Oh, well, they never asked this kind of question about men walking around the moon, or things like that, or how COVID viruses can be defeated." And so they make up their own hypotheses that has no scientific basis to it. Um, Jill, I think you've heard of fluorides.
I sure have. Are they good or bad? I get so
Yeah,
confused. In the water to drink it, not to drink it, to put on your teeth, not to put on your teeth. Yes.
well, I learned in freshman chemistry how fluoride works. I learned
Yes.
it again in organic chemistry for the little fluoride ion
Wow.
actually is able in the mouth. It can knock OH atomic groups
Yeah.
off of the enamel of the teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And an OH group is really an acid group. And our mouths get too acidic.
Okay.
And if you don't use fluoride
Oh,
and knock those OH groups off the dental enamel, they can
yeah.
decay. And it's as simple as that. So a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm opposed to fluoride." But that's what fluoride is about. Fluoride itself it has a low reactivity. The
Really?
fluoride has a negative charge to it, but it can replace acid OH groups on the enamel of the teeth. And so that means that your tooth can last a long time.
Wow.
And I've sometimes experimented with my own mouth when I couldn't get to dental care
Tell me,
as
tell me. I'm
quickly.
curious. They just told my son he needs a fluoride treatment because he took his braces off and it's all yellow.
Well, the yellow is that's from I forget what you call it, the plaque
Yes, yes. But I, for
that
some
sticks
reason,
on the teeth. And I had my first dental treatment here in the desert about a month ago, and I hadn't been able to get to a dentist for a year. And so that meant I was getting plaques on my toothies, and finally got to a great dentist who lives right here in my own little desert town. And oh, my teeth were in good shape. I knew I had a few cavities, and he said, "Well, I think I can save your cavities." And he did. I'm just so grateful he was so skilled to do that.
wow.
So I pay close attention to my healthcare practitioners, and I don't go out on any limbs, but I also read up on things that I might not fully understand scientifically. So I read up on it and compare notes with
Yeah.
others. So that's what I'm thinking about today.
Wow.
Um, I don't know if I mentioned, I think our last podcast,
Uh,
I had had, I had a blood, I had to give blood to
mm-hmm.
be tested. My physician said, I want to get a blood test on you to see how all of the systems in your body are doing. And that led to some interesting things, which I think I might have mentioned that last week. I think, I'm not sure. But if a human being loses too much blood too quickly, they can pass out
Mm.
or get dizzy. And I was okay with the phlebotomy, and I drove to Yucca Valley, 20 miles away, and got the needle in my arm. But she had to take so many vials of my
Wow.
blood out to be tested. But it didn't affect me, not right away anyway.
Yeah.
It did 2 days later. And that's another one of my life experiences that proved to be an experiment in how to
Amazing.
take care of myself better.
Hey,
Um,
how are you taking care of yourself for the holiday? What are you guys doing?
well, one thing I did was to take care of the creative side of my brain
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I use to play music.
Yeah.
And the house of worship I go to asked if I would play a Christmas prelude and a Christmas postlude. Of course, the way I learned the organ in the first place was by playing Christmas carols. And that was back when I was a teenager. I could play the piano, but I learned how to play Christmas carols very well. I just loved Christmas carols. So I played one of the excellent organs here in the desert. That's an electronic version of a pipe organ.
My
And
goodness.
it took a lot of practice, and it was worth it because I hadn't played really in about a year. So I had to get back up to speed with my fingering and all of that. Now I'm saying all that to say that is one way I have kept dexterity, finger dexterity. It's what I call, it's a foil against arthritis. And by keeping my fingers
Yeah.
active on keyboards, it
Hmm.
staves off arthritis.
Hmm.
Fingers don't get stiff. They stay limber and agile. And beside the joy of playing really is a great help to my brain. They say that the right side of the brain controls the feeling part of what the brain does, and the left side, and that's for right-handed people,
Yeah.
but it's the reverse for left-handed people. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm a right-hander,
Wow.
and but that's what I've spent a great deal of time on over this season is to keep my hands. See, that's hand-to-eye coordination, hand to eyes. So I'm reading musical scores and translating it through my brain networks into the fingering and to the foot pedals. I bet that's probably something you didn't know. Organists have 32 pedals to play the
No.
bass notes,
Wow.
and they're down there stretched in a board and you've got to stay agile with those. So my legs get exercise. So a good 1 hour practice is equivalent to running around the track. So also I need to be doing some writing, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what I'll be doing also. I haven't written any letters to friends that don't know where I am because I've moved since the last time I've written. Um, and I try to keep up with a little reading. this book called Determined is our experience of life and our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Is it determined? Is it predetermined? Do we have free will? And so I'm having a debate with myself to look at where I've applied what I think is free will and say, yeah, I got free will. And that's when I talked about great great grandmother, Harry Scott, the last time, about her free will and how she affected the success of her children and her descendants by extension. So I'm one of her freely willing descendants. So when I see a creative opportunity, I jump on it. But I had ancestors that did that. So
Well, I learn more and more about you each and every time. I never knew all this, and you continue to dazzle us. Is this all part of the memoirs, by the way, which we got to tell people?
yes,
This
it
has
is.
been a
It
work of
is.
how long and a passion of how long?
Right. Uh, yeah, that's important because that's when I began to learn the science of kinesiology.
Okay.
Kine, Kine means Penny, and then the next Siology. Kinesiology
Okay.
is the process of learning through the application of
Yeah.
your physical muscles in your body. So the way I hold a pen and apply it to paper to write down notes I'm taking from a
Mm-hmm.
book, or how I go to a whiteboard and press on the board with highlighters and put the words up on or drawings on the whiteboard. That's another form expression of
Oh.
kinesiology. But it's how I memorized complex equations in graduate school
Mm.
that, well, in undergrad also, that's where it started. Um, I haven't painted lately, but I'd love to get back to that because that's a key learning tool. Is if a teacher of mathematics were to tell the students, okay, I'm going to give you an examination, instead of writing the answers on a piece of paper, I want you to draw a picture of the answer to my question about a certain equation.
Mm-hmm.
That causes a different part of the brain to get involved than if you're just trying to sit there reading a book and memorize what you're reading. But if you
Yeah.
get active with your muscles while you're reading something or talking about something, it causes the information to go more quickly and more deeply into your brain cells.
Mm.
So we're trying to teach computers to do that. And
Yeah.
that gets us to AI again.
Which is taking over.
And the main thing about AI is that uh, to not fear. And I was thinking of that just yesterday. With all of the chaos going on in the country and the world, it's learning new ways of dealing with fear. Just don't buy into fear. If someone is saying something that scares you, don't listen to it. Go try to read something about it and get the
Yeah.
truth about it rather than letting your fear eat you alive.
May I
So
ask?
I use that.
You mentioned
I use that.
your oh, go ahead.
So I had to use techniques like that when I was getting ready to take an examination in college, and just cutting down the fear just made me do so very much better than if than if I took fear with me Have you been into sessions, Jill, where it might be a meditation, it might be a speaker, a TED talk, and they pass out paper bags at the door
We love those
and
paper bags.
they
You get
give
all
you a
the
3 by 5 card and
yes.
they say, write down your 10 worst fears,
Oh yeah. Done that with
put it in the
Samsung
bag,
before.
put your
Yeah.
name on it, and leave it at this table until you get done with this seminar.
Huh.
And then you're asked the question, do you want the fear back? When you leave, pick up your bag and take the fear with you. Or you can burn the bag with your fears in it.
Yeah.
Those are some of the latest techniques of Gestalt psychology, transpersonal psychology, Jungian psychology, where you take a mentalistic concept and turn it into something concrete and then do something with it, either to absorb it into yourself or destroy it if you don't want it.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I think I would face my fears, open it up, and read each one.
Well, there's many ways to handle it. I
Yeah.
think that's the beauty of it.
What do you think? What would you do?
Um, well, I used a number of approaches when I was professoring at Cal Poly. And
Hmm.
one of the exercises I used to do was because my my classes, I'd have maybe 100 students in a class on freshman chemistry, but I'd be studying something in particular about how the light interacts with the chemicals we're using in the classroom. And so there are those days I used to say, hey, everybody, why don't we look at each other and tell ourselves what we see? But the
Yeah.
thing I'm trying to get across is that, you know, we all have skin colors. We all have different skin colors.
Mm-hmm.
Some skin colors may be more similar, but it doesn't mean you don't have differences. So I said, look at all of the European descendants, and Asian descendants, and Hispanic people, and African American people sitting in this room, and just
Yeah.
look at each other and say, oh, isn't that a lovely coloration that you have? But what that does is it starts to get people used to who we really are. We're not our skin color, but our skin color is something that we can appreciate. And it has advantages when we go out in the sun. Our skin changes color depending on its needs to stay in the sun or away from the sun.
Yeah.
So, so what do you think of that?
You always seem to amaze me. I think I learned a lot from you each and every time, including fluoride and
Mhm.
properties and
Right,
as a chemist, things I don't know. And,
right,
someone like
right,
you're still working. You said you're not stopping. You're doing more property. You mentioned with your
right.
family. Are you investing in property? Are you buying a new place? Are you
Yeah,
moving?
we bought a property
Where in California or
in yeah right here in 29 Palms.
are you actually
We're
going to renovate and live there or are you going to sell it
we're
or
going to we're going to do some renovations. So my sister has a daughter, son-in-law, and a grandchild, and then my brother has a daughter up in Northern California, but she's going to stay where she is right now. And then, so we'll all be there while we develop some new ideas for higher education because we're out there where at night where there's no street lights, you can see every star in the Milky Way.
oh my gosh.
And it is an amazing thing to see. So we've had these meteor showers, the Aeneid, whatever their name is, and it's just these meteors just streak across the sky. It takes about a second, for them to streak across the sky, but they come from a certain area of the solar system, way, way out there.
Mm,
And but we want to establish a retreat for college students
amazing.
to come out and experience that and be able to talk about it with professors and how does all that relate to our lives?
Yeah.
Where did we come from?
Well, let me ask, you have the next few days, you have the holidays coming up. Are you Jewish? Are you Catholic? Do you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, both? Or
I'm very multi religious. I started out in the Protestant church and still in the Protestant church, but I enjoy going to Catholic services when I do. Or I've been to synagogues, so I've tried to fill my awareness with as much as I can fill myself about how different people worship their creator, worship the universe, or congregate with the universe.
hmm
California is a good place to do that because there's so many religious affiliations that developed out here. Um, so people are used to that. And it's from all perspectives. Some are more traditional, some are less traditional.
Well, what do you have planned? What will you be doing with the family?
I'm sorry, say that.
What do you have
I,
planned for the holidays? What will you be doing the rest of the week? Are you going to see your sister again? Or
I'm
I
going
know
to be,
Thanksgiving you flew, you were in Texas,
we're,
right? Or
we're
Arizona.
going to, we're going to stay home for
Nice.
Christmas and get this house, move our things into there. So they've already started. My sister and brother have already started moving in. I won't do that until later next week or something like that. But
hmm
it's really like starting a whole new time of life, a whole new era of existing. And it was highlighted by the fact that at 5 this morning I got a a text message from a close friend in Florida who just passed away a couple of days ago, who's the same age that I am. He's a physicist. I'm a chemist interested in physics. And we did get to meet here in California last, uh, in June, when he and his wife came out here and were able to spend time together saying, "What have you done since UCLA days?"
Yeah. Oh, well, we are out of
Discovered,
time. Unfortunately, go ahead. We got to wrap it up. Sorry. Go ahead.
well, anyway, I'll use my book again,
Yes.
Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown, gives the stories that I like to podcast about, but many of them are right there in that book, such as the particularly devices I use to master advanced chemistry and physics, and then mastered other fields of study as well. And
Yeah.
right now, I use it to try to predict where the country is going and how to get there better than if we don't know anything or
Yeah.
don't think about it.
Well,
So
thank you.
that was why I mentioned the Jerusalem temples.
Oh, well, how do we contact you?
Uh, Try my website, grantvenerablephd.com, all lowercase, and my email, VENTWO at AOL.com, but put a subject on that. Uh, put Grant's memoir as a subject,
Yeah.
and that will put you in touch with me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so
You
much.
know?
I hope you have a fantastic
Yeah.
day. Happy holidays to you, to your family, and we'll touch
Okay.
base again, I hope, after this. And hold on, let me get this up. Wishing you and your family really a happy and healthy holiday, whatever,
Okay.
you all do together.
Okay.
Enjoy. And before the
Yeah.
new year, do I see you before the new year?
Yeah, it's just a few days to the new year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great, great,
Well,
great.
thanks a lot.
No,
Thanks a
thank
lot,
you. Enjoy the day,
Jill.
Grant.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure,
Okay.
sweetheart. Bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.